Mail order bride arrived during a blizzard. The silent rancher built her a cabin without a word. The winds of Erivo's IV howled like a living thing. Snow, sharp and blinding, lashed across the frontier plains, curling in unnatural patterns as if guided by some unseen force. The harsh sunlight reflected off the icy landscape, making the world glare white. It was a planet that tested the limits of anyone who dared call it home. Lena gripped the edges of her small transport crate, her knuckles white beneath her gloves. She had traveled thousands of miles, crossing asteroid belts, orbital stations, and remote shuttle routes to reach this desolate world. Erivo's IV was nothing like the controlled, warm colony she had left behind. Here, every step outside the small outposts could mean frostbite, injury, or death. Yet she had chosen this life. She had chosen a future with a man she had never met, a man whose name was only whispered in frontier circles, Cade, the silent rancher. The transport shuttle shuddered violently as the blizzard clawed at its metal hull. Lena pressed her forehead against the cold window, staring out at the swirling snow. In the distance, dark shapes moved under the storm, hulking forms of alien animals, adapted to the freezing plains. Their eyes glowed faintly red, reflecting the shuttle's lights. Tales of settlers lost to the creatures flooded her mind, but she pushed the fear aside. She was determined. She had to survive. She had to reach Cade. When the shuttle finally landed, it felt like the end of a battle she had been fighting for months. The door hissed open, and a wall of icy wind hit her, almost knocking her to the ground. Her boots slipped in the snow and she clutched the railing for balance. Visibility was almost zero. The world outside was a blur of white and gray, with shapes moving like shadows in the storm. She heard a crunch in the snow behind her. Turning, she squinted through the snowflakes. A figure approached, moving steadily through the blizzard. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and his dark coat flapped against the wind like a banner. The scarf wrapped around his face left only sharp eyes visible, eyes that scanned her carefully. "Cade," Lena called out, her voice trembling more from exhaustion than fear. The figure nodded once, barely perceptible. He said nothing. That single nod was enough. He held out a hand and she grabbed it, letting him guide her through the storm. His grip was firm, strong, and steady, a man used to commanding not by words but by action. The wind tore at their clothes and hair, yet Cade moved with a rhythm that suggested he had been surviving these storms for years. Lena struggled to keep up, but he never faltered. They walked in silence, the storm deafening around them. Every step was a battle against snowdrifts that reached above their knees. Lena wondered how anyone could survive here. She tried to imagine the ranch he must live on. If a man could endure this, his home must be built like a fortress. But when she glanced at him, she saw no fear in his eyes, only focus, only movement. After what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, the outline of a small structure emerged from the blizzard. It was a cabin, partially covered in snow, its roof heavy with ice. Smoke rose from a narrow chimney, bending sideways under the wind. Lena's heart leapt. A fire, warmth, shelter. Cade stopped just short of the cabin, scanning the storm once more. Then, silently, he stepped inside and held the door open for her. Lena entered quickly, grateful for the reprieve. Inside, the cabin was simple but sturdy. The walls were reinforced with local timber, the floor covered in rough planks, and a small hearth glowed with a welcoming warmth. The scent of burning wood mingled with the faint smell of animals and earth. Lena looked around, unsure of what to say. Cade's eyes followed her, calm and unreadable. He gestured toward a bench near the fire. She sat, shivering, letting the heat seep into her frozen limbs. You made this?" she asked, her voice trembling. He shook his head slightly. His hands went to a pile of blankets which he draped over her shoulders. No words came, only action. Lena realized slowly that Cade was a man of few words, a man who communicated through what he did rather than what he said. Outside, the blizzard roared on, as if challenging her very presence. Lena felt a pang of fear, thinking about how alone she was in this world. But then she looked at Cade, standing near the doorway, silent and watchful, and a strange calm settled over her. She wasn't entirely alone. The hours passed in quiet tension. Cade moved around the cabin, checking supplies, stacking firewood, securing the door against the wind. Lena followed his movements, trying to understand him, trying to match his efficiency. She chopped small pieces of firewood, arranged them neatly, and filled the water bucket. He glanced at her once approvingly, though still no words. Night fell, but the blizzard refused to relent. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the cabin walls and making the snow scrape against the windows. Lena sat by the fire, wrapped in blankets, her thoughts drifting. She had left a comfortable life behind, hoping for companionship and stability, but she realized that this world demanded more than comfort. It demanded courage, endurance, and an unyielding spirit. Cade moved closer to the fire, removing his gloves and rubbing his hands together. Lena watched him, noticing every detail, the calloused palms, the precise movements, the way he seemed entirely at home in the storm that would terrify most people. She wondered how many winters he had endured here alone. How many storms had he survived without complaint? Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from outside, the sound of ice and wood breaking under the storm's force. Cade sprang to his feet, eyes sharp. He grabbed a reinforced plank and stepped toward the door. Lena froze, unsure what to do. He gestured for her to stay inside. Minutes later he returned, calm, plank still in hand. No explanation. Lena realized he had faced whatever danger was out there alone. A part of her felt both terrified and inspired. This man, who spoke almost no words, had a power that could not be measured by speech. It was a quiet, relentless strength, a mastery of this planet's harshness. She wanted to ask him so many questions, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she simply nodded, feeling a strange connection growing between them. Cade's silence was not coldness. It was a language of its own, one that Lena was only beginning to understand. By the time she finally closed her eyes to rest, the storm was still raging outside, but inside the cabin there was warmth, safety, and a faint sense of hope. Lena realized that survival on Erivo's IV would not come from luck. It would come from courage, intelligence, and learning to trust in the strength of the humans who dared to call this planet home. And Cade, the silent rancher, was living proof of that truth. Morning arrived with no mercy. Snow drifts blocked the doorway, ice formed along the edges of the roof, and the wind screamed like 1,000 voices. Lena shivered but felt a strange determination rising within her. She had survived the storm. She had reached Cade. And if she could endure this, she could endure anything. Cade moved around the cabin efficiently, opening windows just enough to let in fresh air without letting the storm inside. He checked the water supply, examined the firewood, and gestured for Lena to come outside. She hesitated, but he simply pointed toward a cleared path. Taking a deep breath, she stepped into the snow, feeling the sting of ice on her face. Yet with each step, she felt alive in a way she never had before. The storm seemed endless, but Lena was beginning to understand something vital. Humans had a unique way of surviving, even thriving, where others would fail. It wasn't luck or speed or even sheer strength. It was ingenuity, courage, and the will to act in the face of impossible odds. Cade embodied that principle. Silent, unwavering, and determined, he had built a life here against every challenge. Lena's resolve hardened. She would learn from him. She would match his strength with her own. And slowly she realized she was no longer just a visitor in this world. She was becoming part of it. As the blizzard raged on, Lena and Cade stood together outside the cabin for a brief moment, surveying the frozen plains. Neither spoke, but there was understanding in the shared silence. They were both fighters in their own way, humans capable of shaping their destiny in a world that seemed intent on swallowing them whole. And in that moment, Lena knew. The story of survival on Erivo's IV was only beginning. The storm had eased by morning, leaving Erivo's IV's plains glazed with ice and heavy snow. The world sparkled under the weak sunlight, frozen and silent. Lena stepped outside the cabin, her boots crunching against the icy ground. The air was biting cold, sharper than any winter she had experienced on Earth. She pulled her scarf tighter around her face, scanning the horizon. Cade was already at work. His movements were precise and deliberate. Without a word, he chopped through snowdrifts with an energy-efficient plasma saw, cleared the path to the small storage shed, and began hauling timber. Lena watched him, amazed by his strength. Every piece of wood he moved seemed heavy enough to break a normal person's back, but Cade handled it as if it were nothing. Lena knew it was her turn to help, but the weight of the timber made her hesitate. Cade glanced at her once, his dark eyes unreadable, and then continued working. The message was clear. If you want to survive here, you need to act. Gathering her courage, Lena approached the pile of timber. She lifted a small beam, straining against its weight. Her muscles burned quickly, but she refused to drop it. Cade paused for a moment, watching her carefully. Without a word, he nodded as if to say, "Good, keep going." That small gesture, silent yet powerful, sparked a strange determination in her. Over the next few hours, Lena and Cade worked side by side. He demonstrated how to stack the timber so it would support the roof against the planet's heavy snowfalls. He showed her how to reinforce the walls using simple braces and energy locks. Lena learned quickly, surprising even herself with how her hands and mind adapted to the work. She realized that survival here wasn't just about strength. It was about thinking, planning, and acting efficiently. By midday, the storm clouds had cleared slightly, revealing the rugged beauty of Erivo's IV. Distant mountains, covered in ice, gleamed under the pale sun. Herds of alien animals, their thick fur glinting in the light, grazed in the far distance. The sight reminded Lena why Cade had come here in the first place. This world was unforgiving, but it was alive, full of challenges that demanded courage, intelligence, and resilience. As the day passed, the skeleton of the cabin began to take shape. Cade worked silently, hammering beams together, sealing cracks with a thick resin harvested from local trees, and reinforcing windows with clear alloy sheets. Lena followed his instructions, learning by watching and imitating. She noticed something remarkable. Cade's silence did not create distance. On the contrary, it made every action more meaningful. Communication between them was no longer about words. It was about observation, understanding, and trust. During a short break, Lena approached Cade, her breath steaming in the cold air. "Why don't you talk much?" she asked softly. Cade glanced at her but didn't answer. Instead, he pointed to a partially assembled wall and then to the snow-covered plains beyond. The message was clear: actions speak louder than words. "Let me show you instead." Lena smiled faintly. She was beginning to understand that in this world, words were often useless, only deeds mattered. By evening, the cabin was mostly complete. The roof was secure, the walls thick and insulated, and the small hearth ready for fire. Lena looked around, feeling a mix of exhaustion and pride. She had built more in one day than she had in years back on Earth. The experience had taught her something profound. Humans could adapt, learn, and thrive even in the harshest conditions if they had the will to survive. Cade started the fire in the hearth, the flames casting a warm glow across the cabin. He gestured for Lena to bring water from the small supply container. As she did, she noticed his hands were rough and scarred, evidence of a life spent in constant struggle. Yet despite the harshness of his life, there was an elegance to the way he moved, a harmony between strength and skill. Night fell early. Erivo's IV's twin moons rose, casting silver light across the icy plains. Lena and Cade sat near the fire, the silence between them comfortable now. She thought about her journey to this world, the fear, the uncertainty, the cold, and the loneliness. And she realized something. She had arrived not just at a cabin, but at a place where she could grow stronger, smarter, and more capable than she had ever imagined. Cade finally spoke, but only a few words. Rest. Tomorrow, work continues. It was not a conversation, but it was enough. Lena nodded, understanding. Sleep was not a luxury here, it was a necessity. She curled up on a simple bedroll, feeling the warmth of the fire against her chilled body. Outside, the wind howled, but inside there was safety. And slowly, exhaustion took over, lulling her into a deep sleep. The next morning, Lena awoke to the sound of Cade chopping snow off the roof. The storm from yesterday had left heavy ice and snow piled high, threatening the cabin structure. Lena rubbed her eyes and stepped outside, ready to help. Together, they cleared the roof, reinforced the walls, and checked the perimeter for any weak points. Cade moved with remarkable efficiency, and Lena followed, learning to anticipate his needs and actions. By midday, they had finished the work. Lena was tired, her muscles sore, but a sense of accomplishment filled her. Cade handed her a warm drink from a metal cup, and for the first time, Lena felt truly part of this frontier life. She was no longer just a visitor. She was a partner in survival, capable of contributing to something bigger than herself. The days that followed were a rhythm of work, learning, and adaptation. Lena learned to handle the small livestock Cade kept, creatures adapted to the cold, their fur thick and almost metallic in texture. She learned to repair energy fences, clean water systems, and even predict weather patterns by observing the clouds and wind. Each day her confidence grew, and with it her respect for Cade. One afternoon, as they repaired a damaged fence, Lena looked at him closely. "You really can do anything, don't you?" she said, half in awe. Cade only shrugged, adjusting a brace. But the faint curve of his lips suggested approval. Lena laughed softly. It was strange to feel a connection with someone who spoke so little, yet she felt it growing every day. Through shared effort, shared survival, and shared triumphs over a world that would have defeated anyone else. As the week passed, the cabin transformed from a rough shelter into a proper home. Cade added shelves, reinforced the floor, and even created a small garden area inside using artificial sunlight. Lena helped as much as she could, finding satisfaction in her ability to contribute. She realized that humans had a unique strength, the ability to imagine, create, and improve. Even on a harsh, alien world, that ingenuity could turn survival into thriving. One night, after a long day of work, Lena stood outside the cabin, staring at the frozen plains. The wind had died down, leaving a serene silence. Cade joined her, standing slightly behind, as he often did. Neither spoke, yet the moment was full of understanding. Lena thought about how far she had come, from fear and uncertainty to capability and confidence. She had learned that humans could adapt to almost anything, as long as they were willing to try, endure, and learn. Cade finally broke the silence, his voice low but steady. "You're learning fast." Lena smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. "I have a good teacher," she replied. For the first time, Cade laughed, a quiet, rare sound that blended with the wind and snow. It was a moment of humanity in a harsh world, a reminder that survival was not just about strength, but about connection, trust, and shared effort. As they returned to the cabin, Lena realized that Erivo's IV was no longer just a place of danger and fear. It was a place of growth, challenge, and opportunity. And she was ready to face whatever came next, side by side with the silent rancher who had shown her the true meaning of human resilience. The storm had tested them, the snow had challenged them, and the planet had threatened them. But Lena and Cade had endured. And as the cabin glowed warmly in the cold night, it became clear. Humans were not just surviving on Erivo's IV, they were beginning to thrive. The days after the storm brought a fragile peace to Erivo's IV. The sky was clear, and the air crisp with the scent of ice and snow. For Lena, the calm was a chance to catch her breath and explore the vast ranch that Cade had carved out of the frozen wilderness. But she quickly realized that Erivo's IV's beauty was dangerous. Every quiet moment was a reminder that life here demanded constant attention and vigilance. The ranch stretched for miles, a mixture of frozen plains, rocky outcroppings, and fenced areas where genetically enhanced livestock grazed. These animals were strange yet magnificent, creatures with thick, metallic fur and eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. They were hardy and adapted to survive Erivo's IV's severe climate, but even they could be vulnerable to the planet's predators. Cade led Lena through the ranch, pointing out the different herds and teaching her how to read the animals' behavior. Without speaking much, he demonstrated how to approach a skittish creature, how to use subtle movements to guide it, and how to notice early signs of illness or stress. Lena watched carefully, learning not only the techniques but the patience required. Here mistakes could be fatal. Later, as they checked the fences, a deep, resonant growl echoed across the plains. Lena froze. From behind a ridge, a group of alien predators emerged. Their massive bodies were covered in ice-like scales, and their claws gleamed as they approached the perimeter. Cade moved quickly, positioning himself between the creatures and the livestock. He gestured for Lena to stay behind him. The predators tested the fences, their claws scratching against the reinforced metal. Cade adjusted the energy shields, reinforcing weak points, and watched the creatures carefully. Every movement was precise, calculated. Lena realized that survival here wasn't just about courage, it was about strategy and intelligence. The predators eventually backed away, discouraged by the reinforced defenses. Lena exhaled slowly, her heart racing. She looked at Cade, who simply nodded, eyes calm. She understood then that humans could endure any challenge if they combined their courage with clever thinking. Strength alone was not enough. The mind was as important as the body. Over the next few days, Cade put Lena to the test. He had her repair broken fences, track the herds across frozen valleys, and even face a small pack of predators under controlled conditions. She learned quickly, discovering that her fears could be managed with knowledge and preparation. Each success built her confidence, and each failure taught her resilience. One evening, after a long day, Lena and Cade returned to the cabin. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple as Erivo's IV's twin suns dipped toward the horizon. The beauty of the frozen landscape took Lena's breath away, but she knew that danger could arrive at any moment. Cade noticed her hesitation and gestured for her to help him reinforce the cabin door. Lena understood without a word. On this planet, vigilance never ended. As night fell, Lena sat by the hearth, exhausted but exhilarated. She realized how much she had changed in a short time. Fear no longer ruled her actions. Instead, she felt determination, focus, and a growing respect for the power of human ingenuity. She thought about Cade, whose silent guidance had taught her that words were not always necessary for communication. Actions, skill, and knowledge were more powerful than speech. The next day brought another challenge. A sudden ice storm struck, turning the plains into a dangerous maze of slippery surfaces and falling ice. Lena and Cade moved carefully, securing animals, checking shelters, and reinforcing fences. Lena slipped on the ice but managed to recover, learning quickly how to adapt her movements to the hazardous terrain. Cade caught her arm without a word, steadying her, and continued working as if nothing had happened. The silent mentorship taught her more than any lecture ever could. During a brief break, Lena helped Cade tend to an injured animal. Its leg was twisted in the snow, and it whimpered softly. Lena followed Cade's lead, using a simple harness to immobilize the creature. Together, they carried it back to the cabin, where Lena applied the healing salve Cade had prepared. The animal calmed under her touch. She realized that humans could not only survive in this world, they could care, nurture, and repair, turning adversity into triumph. Days turned into weeks, and Lena grew stronger and more capable. She could track animals across the frozen plains, repair energy fences, and even predict small weather changes that might threaten the ranch. Cade remained largely silent, but he began to gesture more often, showing subtle signs of approval. Lena knew she was earning his respect. One afternoon, while scouting the far edges of the ranch, Lena spotted something unusual. A herd of alien predators had gathered near the cliffs, far larger than usual. She signaled to Cade, who studied the scene carefully. "We need a plan," he finally said, breaking his long silence. Together, they devised a strategy. Cade used a combination of energy barriers and carefully positioned feed decoys to lure the predators away from the livestock. Lena executed the plan with precision, following Cade's silent instructions and adjusting based on her observations. The predators, confused and frustrated, eventually retreated. Lena felt a surge of pride. She had contributed not only to survival but to victory. That night, as they sat by the fire, Cade finally spoke more than a single sentence. "You are learning fast. Strong, smart, like humans are meant to be." Lena smiled, understanding the deeper meaning. On Erivo's IV, survival was more than endurance. It was about using every tool, every skill, and every ounce of intelligence to overcome the world's challenges. Humans, with their adaptability and ingenuity, were uniquely suited for it. Over time, Lena and Cade developed a rhythm. Cade continued to teach, showing her advanced techniques for repairing shelters, predicting storms, and defending the ranch. Lena began to anticipate his actions, moving almost instinctively to help. Their partnership grew, silent yet powerful, based on trust, mutual respect, and shared experience. One morning, Lena awoke to the sound of a distant howl. She knew immediately that it was a predator, large, dangerous, and likely hungry. Cade was already outside, preparing defenses. Lena followed him, moving with confidence now rather than fear. She positioned barriers, checked alarms, and prepared the animals. When the predator arrived, she felt no panic. She felt capability, skill, and the determination that Cade had instilled in her. The predator attacked, testing the barriers. Lena and Cade responded in perfect coordination, using reinforced fences, noise deterrents, and precise movements to drive the creature back. It was a tense battle, lasting nearly an hour, but when the predator finally retreated, Lena realized that she had fought not as a frightened newcomer, but as a human fully capable of survival on Erivo's IV. That night, as they repaired minor damage and prepared for the next challenge, Lena reflected on how far she had come. Just weeks ago, she had arrived frightened and uncertain. Now, she was confident, skilled, and ready to face the frontier's dangers head-on. Cade's silent mentorship had taught her more than survival skills. It had taught her the power of human resilience, intelligence, and cooperation. As the twin moons rose, casting silver light across the frozen plains, Lena stood outside the cabin, watching the stars sparkle in the cold night sky. Cade joined her silently, their presence together a testament to human endurance. She realized that no matter what challenges Erivo's IV threw at them, humans could endure, adapt, and thrive. The frontier was harsh, unpredictable, and unforgiving. But it was also a place where humans could rise above their limitations, testing their strength, courage, and ingenuity in ways no other species could. Lena smiled at the thought. This was more than survival. This was humanity at its best. And together, she and Cade were living proof. The wind had calmed, leaving Erivo's IV's plains quiet, almost serene. The snow shimmered under the twin suns, sparkling like crystals scattered across the frozen land. The cold was still sharp, but the air was lighter, as if the planet itself had exhaled after weeks of storms and chaos. Lena stood outside the cabin, stretching her sore muscles from another long day of work. The ranch had grown significantly since her arrival. Fences now formed strong, organized pens for the alien livestock. The cabin was reinforced, with additional storage and an indoor garden that Cade had built using artificial sunlight. It was a small miracle, a human-shaped haven in a harsh, unyielding world. Cade worked nearby, silently reinforcing a gate to keep the larger animals from wandering too close to the cliffs. Lena watched him, her mind full of questions she had never dared to ask. In all the weeks she had spent with him, he had rarely spoken, communicating instead through gestures, demonstration, and subtle nods. His silence had become a kind of rhythm, a language of its own. But deep down, Lena longed to hear his thoughts, even just a few words. Suddenly, a storm blew in, much smaller than the ones before but fierce enough to cause concern. The sky darkened, and snowflakes began to fall in sharp, jagged patterns. Lena and Cade moved quickly to secure the perimeter. She carried reinforced panels to replace weakened sections of the fences, while Cade adjusted the energy barriers. Every movement was precise, calculated. The wind picked up, carrying a strange, high-pitched sound across the plains. Lena froze. From the distance, a pack of predators had arrived, larger and more aggressive than any they had faced before. Their glowing eyes reflected the fading sunlight and their claws scraped against the frozen ground. Lena's heart raced, but she didn't falter. She had learned well. Cade positioned himself near the strongest section of the fence, silently signaling Lena to cover another area. Together, they worked like a single organism, Cade guiding through gestures, Lena anticipating his needs. The predators tested the fence, but the energy shields held. Lena reinforced weak points, remembering every lesson Cade had shown her. The pack eventually retreated, frustrated by the humans' skill and strategy. After the danger had passed, Lena and Cade returned to the cabin. Her hands were raw, her muscles screaming in protest, but she felt exhilaration coursing through her. She had survived and helped defend the ranch. She had survived because of what humans could do: observe, plan, act, and adapt. Inside the cabin, Lena dropped into a chair by the fire, trying to catch her breath. Cade sat across from her, silently removing his gloves. For the first time, Lena studied him without fear or hesitation. His hands were calloused and scarred, a testament to years of struggle on this unforgiving planet. His eyes, sharp and dark, held a weight that she had never fully understood: responsibility, patience, and unspoken wisdom. She wanted to ask him about his past, his thoughts, why he had come here alone, but words felt inadequate. She had learned from him that action often spoke louder than speech. Yet something about the evening, the calm after the storm, the warmth of the fire, the safety they had created together, made her wish for a deeper connection. Cade broke the silence, his voice low and steady. "You survived because you refused to quit." The words struck Lena like lightning. For weeks, he had been silent, teaching her through demonstration, observation, and subtle guidance. But now, in this single sentence, he had communicated something profound. She had earned his respect, not through charm or words, but through determination, courage, and effort. I didn't know if I could," she admitted softly, her voice almost lost in the crackling of the fire. Cade's eyes softened just slightly. "You could, you can." The simplicity of his speech, the weight behind it, left Lena speechless. She realized then that Cade's silence had not been indifference. It had been a way to let her discover her own strength, to push her to learn, to survive, and to grow. Words were not always necessary to teach someone. Actions, perseverance, and shared experience could speak more powerfully than 1,000 conversations. The next morning, Lena woke early, feeling a sense of purpose. She had changed in ways she had never imagined. She was stronger, faster, smarter, and more capable. The frontier was no longer a place that intimidated her. It was a place that challenged her, and she had met every challenge. Cade was already outside, reinforcing the fence near the northern cliffs. Lena joined him, carrying tools and supplies. As they worked side by side, she realized something remarkable. She didn't need constant guidance anymore. She could anticipate his movements, understand his intentions, and act without instruction. Humanity's greatest strength, she realized, was its ability to adapt and grow. During a brief pause, Lena noticed the distant silhouette of a new storm approaching. Unlike the blizzards they had faced before, this one was accompanied by a low rumble, the sound of shifting ice and falling rocks. Cade gestured for Lena to help prepare the livestock. Together they moved the animals to secure pens, reinforced barriers, and double-checked every fence. Lena felt no fear, only focus, determination, and a quiet confidence that humans could endure anything. The storm hit harder than expected. Snow and ice tore across the plains, forcing Lena and Cade to take shelter in a small outbuilding near the northern perimeter. The wind screamed around them, rattling the walls and threatening to tear loose panels from the structure. Lena pressed herself against the wall, adrenaline pumping through her veins. She knew that survival was not guaranteed, but she also knew that humans had a way of turning impossible odds into victory. Hours passed in tense silence. The storm battered the ranch, but Lena and Cade remained calm, working together to secure every vulnerable point. Cade finally spoke again, his voice a low rumble. "Focus. Watch. Adapt." Lena nodded, understanding. Those words were simple, but in them lay the essence of human survival on Erivo's IV. Focus on the task, watch the environment, adapt to the danger. It was a lesson she had internalized fully. When the storm finally subsided, the ranch was battered but intact. The livestock were safe, the fences mostly standing, and the cabin unharmed. Lena looked at Cade, exhausted but exhilarated. He gave her a rare, faint smile, a silent acknowledgement of her skill and courage. That evening, as they repaired minor damage and prepared for the next day, Lena felt a profound sense of connection to Cade. His first words had unlocked something within her, a realization that humans were capable of more than survival. They could thrive, grow, and build a future even in the harshest conditions. Cade finally spoke again, this time longer. "You've learned more in weeks than many humans do in years. Strength, skill, courage, you've earned your place here." Lena's heart swelled. She had come to Erivo's IV uncertain, frightened, and unprepared. Now she was confident, capable, and respected by the man who had silently guided her through every challenge. She realized that humanity's greatest power was not just physical strength. It was resilience, intelligence, and the ability to rise above challenges together. As night fell, Lena and Cade sat by the fire, the warmth and light a stark contrast to the frozen wilderness outside. For the first time, Lena felt truly at home on Erivo's IV. She had not only survived the blizzards, predators, and harsh conditions, she had thrived alongside Cade, learning the essence of human endurance. She glanced at him, curiosity and gratitude in her eyes. "Why did you stay silent all this time?" she asked softly. Cade looked into the fire, then at her, his expression calm. "To let you find your strength, to show you humans are meant to endure and to thrive." Lena nodded, understanding. His silence had been a lesson, a test, and a form of guidance. Humans were remarkable creatures, capable of adapting, surviving, and overcoming even the deadliest challenges. Cade had shown her the truth of it. For the first time, she felt a real sense of partnership. Not through words, but through shared effort, shared struggle, and shared triumph. On Erivo's IV, humans were not just surviving, they were shaping the future, proving that intelligence, courage, and determination could conquer even the most unforgiving environments. As the twin moons rose over the icy plains, Lena and Cade stood outside the cabin, watching the stars glimmer in the frozen night. The storm had tested them, the ranch had challenged them, and the frontier had pushed them to their limits. But humans, Lena realized, had a power that no storm or predator could overcome: the ability to adapt, endure, and thrive together. And in that quiet moment, with the wind finally still and the ranch safe, Lena knew something profound. Survival on Erivo's IV was only the beginning. Humanity had proven its strength, and she was now fully part of it. The frontier was harsh, cold, and dangerous, but humans together could meet any challenge. The winter on Erivo's IV was fading. The icy winds that had once battered the plains were now softer, carrying a clean, sharp scent of snow melting into the frozen soil. The twin suns rose higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the sprawling ranch. The world was still harsh, but it was no longer hostile in the same way. Lena stepped outside the cabin, breathing deeply. The air was cold, yes, but it was invigorating, full of life. Her hands were rough from weeks of labor, her muscles sore but strong. Every ache was a reminder of what she had endured and what she had learned. She had grown faster here than she could have imagined, thanks to the silent, unwavering guidance of Cade. Cade was already at work, moving through the ranch with precise efficiency. He checked the fences, inspected the livestock, and surveyed the distant plains as if every inch of land belonged to him. Lena followed, carrying tools and supplies. She noticed how easily he read the terrain, anticipating threats before they appeared. Over time, she had learned to do the same. "You've improved," Cade said quietly, glancing at her. It was one of the first complete sentences he had spoken to her in weeks, and it carried weight. Not praise, not flattery, but recognition. Lena nodded, feeling the satisfaction that came from shared effort and mutual understanding. The ranch had changed significantly since her arrival. Small enclosures were reinforced with energy barriers. Feed storage was secure, and a series of observation towers allowed for monitoring of predators and weather. Inside the cabin, shelves were stocked with supplies, and a small hydroponic garden provided fresh greens even in the coldest months. Lena had learned to manage it all, from the livestock to the daily repairs. She realized that humans were not just survivors. They were builders, innovators, and problem solvers even in an alien world. That afternoon, a distant rumble shook the ground. Lena froze, instinct kicking in. Cade was already moving toward the edge of the cliffs, scanning the horizon. From the distance, she could see a group of massive predators approaching. Their scales glimmered under the sun, their eyes glowing faintly red. Lena's pulse quickened, but she didn't panic. She had learned strategy, observation, and quick action. She moved alongside Cade, positioning barriers and preparing the livestock for defense. Every movement was deliberate, every decision calculated. The predators tested the fences, but the energy shields held. Lena even anticipated a weak point, reinforcing it just in time to prevent an escape. When the predators finally retreated, Lena felt a surge of pride. She had contributed to a victory, not by luck, but by intelligence, skill, and determination. Cade looked at her with a faint nod, silently acknowledging her growth. Humans, Lena realized, had a power no other species could match: the ability to adapt, learn, and triumph against overwhelming odds. Evening fell, and the ranch settled into a quiet rhythm. Lena and Cade returned to the cabin, tired but satisfied. The fire crackled warmly in the hearth, and the wind outside had softened to a whisper. Lena looked around at what they had built together, a thriving human outpost in a world that could have easily crushed them. "Humans can survive anywhere," Lena said softly, more to herself than to Cade. "They can," Cade agreed, his voice steady. "Because they fight, they think, they never give up." Lena smiled. In these weeks she had seen the truth of that statement. They had faced storms, predators, and the planet's relentless challenges, and they had endured. More than that, they had grown stronger, wiser, and more capable. Humans were not just surviving, they were thriving. The next morning, Lena woke early. Cade was already preparing the livestock for the day. She joined him, checking fences, inspecting animals and repairing minor damage from the previous day. It was routine now, but Lena felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The frontier life was hard, but it was fulfilling in a way she had never known. As they worked, Lena noticed a small group of settlers approaching from the distant outpost. They were curious about the ranch, drawn by tales of a man and woman who had tamed the frozen plains. The settlers watched as Cade and Lena moved with precision, securing the animals and reinforcing fences. It was a display of human capability at its finest: strength, intelligence, and cooperation in action. One of the settlers called out, "How do you survive out here?" "The storms, the predators, it's impossible." Cade glanced at Lena, then at the newcomers. "Humans adapt," he said simply. "We endure, we learn, and we never give up." The settlers looked impressed, some skeptical, but all curious. Lena stepped forward. "It's not just about surviving," she said. "It's about understanding the world, working with it, and using what you have to create something stronger than the challenges around you." The settlers nodded slowly, taking in the truth of her words. Humans had a unique ability to observe, innovate, and thrive in environments that would defeat almost any other species. Erivo's IV was harsh, but humans had proven themselves capable. As the day passed, Lena and Cade worked alongside the settlers, showing them techniques for reinforcing fences, tracking livestock, and predicting storms. The newcomers learned quickly, impressed by the efficiency and skill of the humans who had mastered the frontier. Lena realized that this was another kind of triumph, teaching others to survive and thrive, passing on knowledge that would ensure human endurance for generations. By evening, the settlers had returned to their outpost, leaving Lena and Cade alone. The ranch was quiet once more, the only sounds the crackling fire and the occasional low growl of distant wildlife. Lena leaned against the cabin wall, watching Cade repair a section of the fence. "You've changed everything here," she said softly. "The ranch, the animals, the people who come here, it's like humanity has made this place ours." Cade looked at her, his dark eyes steady. "Humans shape their world," he said, "not by luck, not by waiting, but by acting, learning, and enduring." Lena smiled, understanding fully now. Humanity's greatest power was its ability to face challenges, adapt, and build a future where none seemed possible. Erivo's IV was proof of that power, and they had shaped it into a home, a safe place, and a thriving outpost. The next morning, Lena and Cade set out across the ranch, checking fences, observing livestock, and mapping potential improvements. The landscape was harsh, but it was alive with opportunity. Lena thought about the weeks they had endured together, the storms, the predators, the endless labor, and realized that every challenge had strengthened them. Humans were not defined by comfort or safety. They were defined by their resilience, intelligence, and determination. As they walked, Lena spotted a distant ridge where the sun reflected off ice in brilliant patterns. She turned to Cade. "We've done more than survive," she said. "We've made this place ours. We've thrived." Cade nodded, his expression calm but approving. "And humans will continue to thrive," he said, "because we endure, because we act, because we never stop learning." The sun dipped low over the horizon, casting long shadows across the frozen plains. Lena and Cade stood together, looking out at the world they had conquered not through force alone, but through skill, courage, and human ingenuity. The ranch was more than survival. It was proof that humans could rise above the harshest environments, shape their destiny, and create life where none seemed possible. The night settled softly over the ranch, the twin moons rising to cast silver light across the icy plains. Lena and Cade returned to the cabin, their hearts full of accomplishment and pride. The stormy weeks, the dangers, the endless work, it had all been worth it. They had proven the truth of humanity: resilient, intelligent, adaptable, unstoppable. Inside the cabin, Lena tended to the fire while Cade checked the livestock one last time. The warmth of the hearth spread through her, a symbol of human innovation and perseverance. The frontier was still a challenge, still a test of strength and ingenuity. But they were ready. Humans were ready. For the first time, Lena felt completely at home. She had arrived as a stranger, frightened and uncertain. Now she was confident, capable, and fully part of a world that demanded the best of its inhabitants. She had learned from Cade that survival was not enough. Humans could thrive, adapt, and shape their destiny, no matter the obstacles. And as she looked out across the frozen plains, the glow of the twin suns and moons painting the snow in brilliant light, Lena understood the most important lesson of all. Humanity was not defined by the worlds it inhabited, but by the courage, intelligence, and resilience it brought to those worlds. The frontier of Erivo's IV had tested them, pushed them to their limits, and challenged every skill they possessed. But humans had triumphed. Together, Lena and Cade had built a home, defended it against predators, tamed the land, and inspired others to follow in their footsteps. They had survived, adapted, and proved that humanity could thrive anywhere. The story of Erivo's IV was still being written, but one thing was certain. Wherever humans went, they would endure, they would adapt, and they would triumph. Lena smiled at Cade, who returned the gesture with a rare, quiet nod. The world outside was cold, harsh, and unpredictable, but inside the cabin, surrounded by the warmth of fire and the proof of their shared work, humanity had won. They were alive, they were strong, and they were unstoppable.